Good morning, students. Today we'll be discussing two modernist writers, Joseph Conrad and George Bernard Shaw. So far, we have discussed T.S. Eliot, W.B. Yeats, W.H. Auden, Virginia Woolf, D.H. Lawrence, and James Joyce. I hope you have listened to all those lectures and have made notes. It is very important. Now we move to the last of these authors we have to discuss. They are Joseph Conrad and G.B. Shaw. Starting with Joseph Conrad, he was born in Ukraine, in a city in Ukraine, and his birth name was actually Joseph Theodore Conrad Kozianowski. And later he was anglicized when he became a British citizen. His parents were of Polish nobility, from Holland, and his father, in addition to working as a writer and a translator, was a political activist whose goal was to free Poland from Russian domination. And for this, he was arrested and his family exiled to another place named Vologda. And there, within 7 years, both of his parents died of tuberculosis, and he was sent to live with his mother's brother in Krakow. And he was determined to be a sailor. He left home at the age of 16 and moved to Marseille in France, where he began his apprenticeship, working entry-level positions on several merchant ships. And later, his career started floundering, and he learned that to continue this line of work, he needed the permission of a Russian council. And moreover, Conrad had gambling debts he couldn't pay. And it is said that in a despair, he wounded himself in his chest. It was something like a suicide attempt, which prompted his uncle to settle Conrad's debts and to help him relocate to England. That is when he comes to England. And for the next 16 years, Conrad worked in the British Mercantile Marine, rising in a rank of Master Mariner. And in 1886, at the age of 26, he became a British citizen. And he is one of the greatest novelists to write in the English language. So he doesn't know English, but he was one of the greatest novelists. He did not speak English fluently until his 20s, but he was a master prose stylist who actually brought a non-English sensibility into English literature. And his experiences in sea made him write stories and novels with a nautical setting and that depicts the trials of the human spirit in the midst of what he saw as an impassive, inscrutable universe. As I said earlier, he used this wider world beyond England as settings for his explorations in character and motive. Conrad's novels have a variety of locations which reflect his own extensive travels, mainly as a merchant seaman. Like several of the other important writers of the time, he came to Britain as an exile from elsewhere. And in his early novels, Conrad uses his sea experiences in remote places as a means of exploring human character and English codes of honor and loyalty. For example, in Lord Jim, which came out in 1900, is the story of a young Englishman who panics and deserts his ship. And his other work, Nostromo, is often considered to be Conrad's masterpiece. It was published in 1904, and like many of Conrad's novels, it involves a journey towards discovery in a vividly described and richly peopled country of the mind. Nostromo has a more clearly defined social and political setting than most of his works, but what you see is that it is the moral struggle which is of significance in this work. And Conrad was indeed a profoundly moral novelist, but he recognized the moral complexities of his age, which he believed that stemmed in part from the absence of a very clearly shared set of values between people. So that was actually the characteristics of modern age. And in order to present this world fictionally, Conrad develops techniques of multiple points of view. So a hero like Lord Jim is not judged directly by Conrad, but his behavior is seen from different narrative points, including the viewpoint of a narrator distinct from Conrad himself. So that is why it is said that he was a master of complex narrative techniques, and used techniques such as time shifting, flashbacks, which prevented a reader from adopting too simplistic an interpretation of events. So all these works were definitely not quick read, not an easy read. And his other works, he wrote long novels, short stories, and novellas, and with his most famous novella being Heart of Darkness. So he is mostly remembered for this particular work, Heart of Darkness. In it, Conrad describes a long journey to a place deep inside the Belgian Congo. The title comes from there. And the story is again told by an intermediate narrator, Marlowe, who retraces his first visit to colonial Africa. And we see his growing awareness of the evils he encounters. And this story contrasts Western civilization in Europe with what that civilization has done to Africa. So, here this theme of darkness leads to the figure of Kurtz, another character, the central character. We see a portrait of how the commercial and material exploitation of colonial lands can make man morally hollow, and how it can create a permanent nightmare in the soul. So, Conrad also shares with other writers of this time a sense of impending anarchy. There is this chaos waiting for us, and there is this collapse of moral and political order. And all his explicitly political novels, such as Nostromo, The Secret Agent, Under the Western Eyes, and Victory, shares these concerns. And throughout his fiction, he depicts human isolation, the conflict between different parts of one's personality and external fate, as well as the difficulties of human communication. And he writes with a deep pessimism, which is reminiscent of Thomas Hardy. We see the similarities with Thomas Hardy's novels. And along with that, he appreciates E.M. Foster's idea of only connect. And formally and technically, you see that Conrad is a more innovative and influential writer and closer to modernist than to Hardy or Foster. Conrad's tale, we see that, is concerned with the nature and effects of European imperialism, both economic and colonial imperialism, and it is completely of a different order what you see in Rudyard Kipling. Conrad tries, he deals not with the multiple confrontations of India, but he deals with the intrusion and interference of Europeans in the Pacific, in the East Indies, in South America, and in Africa. So his colonizers are drawn from a variety of national backgrounds, and most are intolerant and exploitative. So the title character in Lord Jim, so he may have proved himself a successful colonial agent and he has earned himself the title Lord. But we see that his organizing virtues are seen as countered by the memory of the corruption of his predecessors and by the deception and ruthlessness. And we see that in Conrad's work, colonialism emerges as both brutal and brutalizing, alienating, alienating native and settlers alike. So he believes that, so he tries to prove that through his novels that power is not simply corrupting, it is systematically open to abuse. So this is about Conrad. We have discussed his concerns, his novels. Now we move to George Bernard Shaw. George Bernard Shaw was an Irish playwright, critic, polemicist, and political activist. He was born in Dublin and he later moved to London in 1876, where he struggled to establish himself as a writer. And it is said that he embarked on a rigorous process of self education. He was a self educated man. By the mid 1880s, he became a respected theatre and music critic. And following a political awakening, he joined this Fabian Society and became its most prominent pamphleteer. So he has been writing plays for years before his first public success came, that was Arms and the Man, and I believe it is part of your syllabus. He wrote more than 60 plays and he brought a stream of realism He became the leading dramatist and Shaw became the leading dramatist of his generation, and in 1925 he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. And as you know, his the views expressed by Shaw were often contentious, were often controversial. Tremendous, he had this tremendous productivity as a dramatist, and this interwar years saw a series of often ambitious plays which achieved varying degrees of popular success. And later he refused all state honors, including the Order of Merit in 1946. George Bernard Shaw was actually a champion of Norwegian Ibsen, famous Henrik Ibsen, who is noted for his work A Doll's House. So G.B. Shaw was a champion of Ibsen, and he began to write plays on similar controversial themes. We have Mrs. Warren's Profession, which was written in 1894 and published in 1898, which is about prostitution. And it was not allowed a full public performance until the 1920s, although it was privately performed in London in 1902. And Shaw always wrote a preface to all those published texts of his plays, which justified his determination to accept problems as the normal material of the drama. In a career which lasted over 60 years, he continued to treat contemporary problems and issues in a total of over 60 plays, of 50 plays through these 60 years. The first, it was Widowers' Houses, which was written in 1892, which dealt with the slum landlord's exploitation of the poor. And there was this Candida, which talks about female equality. John Bull's Other Island, which is his first real success with the Irish question. So his plays are of ideas, debate, and discussion rather than of dramas of character, action, and passion. This has led to his characters being criticized as mere mouthpieces of the author for the views they express. But the best of his plays remain theatrically viable, and many have entered the 20th century consciousness. For example, Man and Superman, with its idea of a life force, Heartbreak House, which more than any other charts the decline of Britain as a power, and then comes Pygmalion, which reveals Shaw's constant fascination with language, famously presented in Eliza Doolittle's Cockney English. So, that is the main character in this work. And Pygmalion famously gave rise to, there is an interesting episode that it famously gave rise to one of the most farcical episodes in the history of stage censorship. It is said that show was allowed to keep the word bloody in Elisa's famous line, "Walk, not bloody likely. I am going in a taxi." So, this word bloody was not to be allowed on the English stage for another 25 years. Shaw was able to make considerable use of this linguistic idiocy in his plays, and which remains. So, this Pygmalion remains his funniest work. And then there is a Saint John based on this John of Arc, who was canonized in 1920. And when you see any of you show as a critical outsider, we understand that he was an Irishman, just like Oscar Wilde, and their outsiders' view of British society. So Shaw, being an outsider, he presented a different view of the British society and allowed them a freedom to observe it critically, which is not found so clearly in any English dramatist of the turn of the century. So that's about George Bernard Shaw. So we have finished discussing all those modernist writers, I believe. Now we have the last section where we discuss post Second World War society and literature. So we are nearing the end of these module. I hope you have made notes of all these things. Now we'll have a section dealing with this post Second World War literature and society. And I'll be going with a live class where we will have a discussion on all of these topics. So be prepared with all the notes. Hope it is clear. Thank you, girls. Have a nice day.